5 days. That is how long it took for Beijing to go from hosting the American president to welcoming his most important rival. Donald Trump landed in Beijing on May 14th with the full weight of American power behind him. Air Force One, a state banquet, cannons firing in salute, school children waving flags. He left 5 days later with no deal on Iran, no progress on trade, no agreement on Taiwan, and a frozen arms package that he described as a negotiating chip. Before the week was out, Vladimir Putin was on a plane to Beijing. And when his aircraft touched down at Beijing Capital International Airport on the evening of May 19th, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi was standing on the tarmac to receive him, with an honor guard, with flags, with youths waving Chinese and Russian colors in the fading light. The contrast between those two arrivals tells you everything you need to understand about where the world's most important relationships actually stand in May 2026. Not where they are claimed to stand. Not what the press releases say. Where they actually stand. Let me take you through everything that happened. What Trump got, what he did not get, what Putin is getting, and what all of it means for the war in Iran, for Taiwan, and for the global order that is being quietly restructured while most people are watching the wrong story. Start with Trump's visit, because the most important thing about it is not what was achieved, it is what was not. Trump arrived in Beijing on May 14th for what was billed as the most consequential U.S.-China summit in nearly a decade. The first American state visit to China since Trump himself came in 2017. The backdrop was extraordinary. A war in the Middle East entering its third month, oil at over $100 a barrel, the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed, and Washington desperately needing Beijing's help to pressure Tehran toward a deal. Trump's advisors had described the summit as potentially historic. Republican Congressman James Comer pointed to Trump's ghost-written book, The Art of the Deal, and said the president had what he needs to reach breakthroughs. Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin told Fox News viewers that Trump was the strongest leader of your and I's time, period. Apparently, officials in Beijing were less impressed. When Trump flew home on May 15th, the scorecard was clear. No progress on Iran, no commitment from China to pressure Tehran, no trade breakthrough, no tariff agreement, no resolution on Taiwan, and a stern private warning from Xi that handling Taiwan poorly could lead to clashes and even conflicts between the two countries. NBC News headline, Trump leaves China empty-handed and no better off than he was before. Foreign Policy magazine described the summit as remarkably banal. The Conversation's analysis concluded that what looked like a stable summit was actually deeply troubling for Trump's position, because Xi gave him nothing while extracting something significant on Taiwan. And that Taiwan dimension is the part of this story that is not receiving nearly enough attention. Before Trump went to Beijing, his administration had authorized a record-setting $11 billion arms package for Taiwan, the largest in American history. HIMARS rocket systems, ATACMS missiles, self-propelled howitzers, drones, equipment specifically designed to make any Chinese military assault on Taiwan as costly as possible. The package had been signed off in December 2025. It was sitting there, ready to be delivered. Trump arrived in Beijing. Xi warned him about Taiwan. Trump listened. And when he flew home, he said, publicly, on the record, that he had not yet made a decision on whether to move forward with the arms package. I will make a determination, he said. And then he added something extraordinary. I think the last thing we need right now is a war that is 9,500 miles away. He called the package a very good negotiating chip. A negotiating chip. The security of a democratic island of 23 million people who have been promised American support for 45 years under the Taiwan Relations Act, described as a negotiating chip. Taiwan's government heard those words. Every American ally in Asia heard those words. And every calculation about American reliability in the Pacific shifted, even slightly, in the days that followed. Beijing heard those words too. And 5 days after Trump said them, Vladimir Putin landed in Beijing. Now here is what most Western coverage of the Putin-Xi summit is getting wrong. It is framing this visit as Putin coming to Beijing as a supplicant, a weakened leader of a struggling economy, desperate for Chinese support, arriving cap in hand. And there is truth in that picture. Russia's economy has been battered by 5 years of war in Ukraine and Western sanctions. Two-way China-Russia trade fell 6.5% in 2025, the first decline in years. Putin acknowledged the need to reverse that downturn. He needs Chinese investment, Chinese technology access, Chinese markets. He is the junior partner in this relationship now, a position that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. But framing this visit as purely about Putin's weakness misses something critical. Putin is also bringing something to Beijing that Washington could not offer. He is bringing confirmation that the alternative order, the world that China and Russia have been quietly building together, is holding, that it survived Trump's charm offensive, that Beijing did not break toward Washington on Iran, that Moscow and Beijing remain aligned on every issue that matters to both of them. Timothy Ash, an associate fellow at Chatham House's Russia and Eurasia program, put it plainly. He told Al Jazeera, "Rather, as Trump went cap in hand to Beijing, so will Putin." But then he added something more important. Moscow will be content that Beijing is not going to abandon Tehran, or Moscow for that matter. That is the message Putin is delivering in person, with a state visit and a signing ceremony and an intimate tea session with Xi that the Kremlin has described as producing serious expectations. While Trump left Beijing having produced a summit that analysts called banal and empty, Putin arrives with the knowledge that the summit confirmed something Russia needed confirmed, that China is not pivoting toward Washington on the issues that matter most. The numbers attached to Putin's visit make the contrast even starker. According to the Kremlin, approximately 40 documents are expected to be signed during the two-day summit. A 47-page joint statement on the deepening China-Russia partnership will be issued. 40 documents, 47 pages. Compare this to Trump's visit, which produced vague language about stabilizing relations and a promise that Xi expressed interest in buying more American oil at some unspecified future date. Now look at the specific issues Putin is raising in Beijing, because they map directly onto everything that has gone wrong with Trump's diplomacy in the past 2 weeks. The first is energy. Russia's oil exports to China grew by 35% in the first quarter of 2026. The Iran war is driving that growth. With Gulf competitors sidelined and the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed, China is buying more Russian crude to compensate for reduced Iranian flows and higher spot prices. Putin wants to lock in that trade relationship with long-term contracts and finalize the pricing arrangement for the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, a massive natural gas project that has been stalled for years over price disagreements. The Iran war has given Putin new leverage in that negotiation. Beijing needs Russian gas more than it did before February 28th. The second issue is Iran itself. Russia has been providing Iran with intelligence and technology throughout the war, something European intelligence agencies and American officials have documented repeatedly. Putin offered in an April 29th phone call with Trump to take Iran's highly enriched uranium to Russia as part of a deal framework. Trump rebuffed the offer and told Putin to focus on ending the war in Ukraine instead. That rebuff was a mistake, not because Putin's offer was necessarily sincere, but because it was an opportunity to keep Russia engaged in a diplomatic process rather than in a spoiler role. Now Putin is in Beijing discussing Iran with the one country that has more leverage over Tehran than anyone else. Whatever China and Russia agree about Iran in that room today will shape the parameters of any deal that is eventually possible. The third issue is Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is now entering its 5th year with no clear end. China has maintained publicly that it has never provided lethal weapons to either side. But 3 European intelligence agencies reported this month that China's military secretly trained approximately 200 Russian troops in China late last year, some of whom have since returned to fight in Ukraine. Beijing's claim of neutrality is wearing thin. Putin is in Beijing to reinforce the relationship that has kept Russia's war economy functioning and to ensure that Chinese support, however indirect, continues. Now step back and look at what all of this, Trump's empty-handed departure, Putin's arrival, the 40 documents, the 47-page joint statement, the Taiwan arms package frozen as a negotiating chip, tells you about the shape of the world in May 2026. The world is not splitting into 2 clear blocks the way the Cold War did. It is more complicated than that. China is simultaneously managing a relationship with the United States that it needs for economic reasons, a relationship with Russia that it needs for strategic reasons, and a relationship with Iran that it needs for energy reasons. Xi is not choosing sides in any simple sense. He is positioning China as the indispensable power, the one that everyone needs, that cannot be bypassed, that holds leverage over every major conflict simultaneously. But there is a choice embedded in the sequencing of this week. Trump visited Beijing and left with nothing. Putin visited Beijing 5 days later and will leave with 40 signed documents and a 47-page joint statement. That contrast is not accidental. Xi choreographed it. The timing of Putin's visit, announced just 1 day after Trump's departure, was a message delivered in the language of diplomatic protocol. America came asking. Russia came as a partner. Xi treated them accordingly. Euronews framed the central question this way: which leader will prove the more persuasive partner for China, Washington or Moscow? The answer, at least for this week, is visible in the numbers. One leader left with vague assurances. The other is leaving with 40 agreements. There is one more dimension of this story that almost no mainstream coverage is addressing. While Trump was in Beijing, a report emerged that Xi had privately told Trump that Putin might come to regret invading Ukraine. Trump denied hearing this when asked about it afterward. But the detail, whether accurate or not, points to something important about Xi's positioning. He is telling different things to different audiences. To Trump, he hints at concerns about Russian adventurism. To Putin, he signs 40 documents and issues a 47-page partnership statement. This is not hypocrisy. It is the diplomacy of a leader who understands that maintaining relationships on all sides simultaneously is the source of China's power. The moment China fully commits to one side, it loses leverage over the other. And leverage, in the world Xi is building, is everything. For the United States, the implications of this week are serious and underappreciated. Washington went to Beijing hoping to get Chinese help ending the Iran war. It left without it. It is now watching Beijing deepen its partnership with Moscow, the country whose war in Ukraine has been the central security crisis for America's European allies for 5 years. And it is doing so while the Taiwan arms package sits in bureaucratic limbo, described by the American president as a negotiating chip rather than a security commitment. For Iran, the week sends a signal that will strengthen the hand of hardliners in Tehran, who argue that waiting out American pressure is the right strategy. If China is not going to lean on Iran, and this week's events suggest it is not, and if Russia is being rewarded for its alignment with China rather than pressured to distance itself from Tehran, then the diplomatic framework that Washington has been trying to construct for 82 days is missing its central pillar. For Taiwan, the week is a warning, not of immediate military action, of something slower and more dangerous: the gradual erosion of the credibility of American commitments. When the American president describes a security guarantee as a negotiating chip, every ally that depends on American security guarantees takes notice. Japan noticed, South Korea noticed, the Philippines noticed, and Taiwan noticed most of all. Xi Jinping is serving tea to Vladimir Putin in Beijing today. 5 days ago, he served tea to Donald Trump. The cups were the same. The relationships, and what was poured into them, were very different. The world's most important power competition is being conducted not on battlefields, but in the sequencing of state visits, the counting of signed documents, and the precise language of joint statements. China is winning that competition this week. Not dramatically, not irreversibly, but clearly. And the question that will define the next decade of global politics is whether Washington understands what is actually happening in Beijing, and whether it has the strategic patience and clarity to respond. This week suggests it does not, but the week is not over yet.